Hello and welcome to Inside the Folder, a podcast that takes a look at a series of shorts I created called the Steele Dossiers. I am your host, Francesco Di Francesco. Today, I speak about a legend that stands at 6'10", weighing in at 309 pounds, with a 30-year legacy, the epitome of Wrestlemania, whose spirit lives within the souls of all mankind. From Death Valley, I present to you the Undertaker. Yes, the second short in the Steele Dossiers series, entitled The Phenom, is based on the World Wrestling Entertainment, the WWE, wrestler known as The Undertaker. Before I get into the short itself and why I made it on the Taker, let's dive into the legend of the dead man himself. So, The Undertaker, whose real name is Mark Calloway, is a retired professional wrestler and is widely regarded as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Calloway began his career in 1987, working various gimmicks until 1990, where he would join the World Wrestling Federation, WWF at the time, and made his first official debut as The Undertaker at the 1990 pay-per-view event called the Survivor Series as the final member of Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Team. Now, what's hilarious to me about this debut, it was building up to who would be the final man on Ted DiBiase's wrestling team that night. It was building up to it, and Ted DiBiase announces it's The Undertaker. The Undertaker is more commonly known of having very, I would say, dramatic, cinematic entrances, which I'll go over in just a little bit. But when he first debuted, there was nothing that would nothing that he has today as the entrance. The lights didn't go down, the lights stayed on. His manager at the time was Brother Love, which is he's a character. He's not the manager that the Undertaker will have afterwards, and everybody knows to be the official manager of The Undertaker. But Brother Loves is this one character, and his catchphrase is, "I love you," with his beet red face there, almost like a tomato. So The Undertaker comes out very dramatic, and he's very stoic, and he's walking really slow, and he's wearing a hat. You know what? Actually, it's good to get into this part now, because when The Undertaker debuted, in case you don't know, just to paint a picture of what this Undertaker character is supposed to depict, he was almost like a Western mortician, dressed in a trench coat, gray striped tie, and gray ringed black Stetson hat, with gray gloves and boot spats, and he had like a pale face, and under his eyes were painted purple to give him kind of like that sort of eerie, kind of like a dead man walking sort of feel, and very Western, like I mentioned earlier, very Western mortician like. And when he wrestled, he would be impervious to pain. So here he comes, this wrestler, stoic, walking slow. As another wrestler would say, Bret Hart, he would say The Undertaker is almost like Frankenstein's monster. But what makes this debut hilarious to me is Roddy Piper, who is another wrestler, he was on commentary. And as soon as the camera showed The Undertaker, Roddy Piper busts in by saying, "Holy cow, look at the size of that ham hock." So I always laugh at that. Maybe I'll put in the little sound bites to that, because it's hilarious just how he says it. So here, yeah, I'll put in the sound bites to how Roddy Piper says it now.
Holy cow! Look at the size of that ham hock!
It just gets me every time. As I said, this is not the typical sort of entrance for The Undertaker. There's many entrances where it's like the lights go down and either smoke comes out or lightning strikes. It's like I said earlier, it's dramatic, it's cinematic, and it fits the character. But this entrance, nothing went down. He just walked out, and this is because it was the first time they actually used the Funeral March by Frederick Chopin. And everybody knows how the Funeral March goes. But over time, WWF composer Jim Johnston changed the Chopin March to create a new theme, which he called the Graveyard Symphony. And according to Jim Johnston, the funeral-esque music helped project, and this is Jimmy Johnston's words, for the Graveyard Symphony, he said it helped project the tragedy, oh, here we go, keeping this alive in every episode, the tragedy, there it is, the tragedy and sadness and all these different elements that touch on the mysterious backstory of the Undertaker's character. So, and it's true, over time his theme music did change. It still had that kind of funeral Chopin march to it, but it did change to fit the character. At one point, the Undertaker does reinvent himself and becomes like a biker Undertaker, where he becomes the American Badass, and his entrance themes are much different, using Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit. But then he comes back as the Undertaker, and he uses another version of that song. As well, I was mentioning the entrances. So he always has these spectacular entrances, and two entrances that I've always liked, so when the WWE does big sort of entrances, it's for special events, and their special event is WrestleMania. It would be like their Super Bowl or World Cup. WWE and the wrestling world in total, it's WrestleMania. And these are where the bigger sort of entrances would be for The Undertaker. Two of my favorites are from Wrestlemania 9. Again, because that stadium was all outdoors, so the lights couldn't go down. But he comes out on a funeral chariot. Oh, I should explain this. The WrestleMania 9 is themed as Egyptian, like Roman Colosseum. It was weird. It's like Roman mixed in with Egyptian. So it's themed that way. More so Egyptian, I would say. And so the Undertaker comes out being carried in a funeral chariot. He's standing in the chariot as two muscular guys pull this chariot dressed in Egyptian garb, and attached to this chariot is like a long staff that has a vulture on it. And as he's coming out through the entranceway, he's just very stoic and he's not moving. The second entrance that I always find cool is WrestleMania 29. He comes out, the lights go down, he comes out, but all these hands around him try to not grab, but just stick their hands out in the silhouette pose, and it's pretty cool to see. If you are watching this or listening to this through the video version of this, I might splice that in there. That way you can see these entrances and know what I'm talking about. As well, that entrance with the hands is the silhouette I use in the title card for this short. What else can I say about The Undertaker's mistake? When he comes out, because he is supernatural. So when the lights are off, when he gets to the ring and he raises his arms, the lights turn on with him as if he's controlling the lights. We all know it's somebody in the back turning the lights on, but it's very cool. When the hands come up, the lights go there. As well, his manager, as I mentioned, when he first debuted, was Brother Love, but eventually he gets a manager by the name of Paul Bearer. And Paul Bearer has this urn with him. And the urn is used to give the Undertaker mysterious powers, which helps energizes him throughout the matches in his earlier career. Eventually, over time and over storylines, the Undertaker leaves Paul Bearer simply because, maybe Paul Bearer's contract came to an end or couldn't do it. So they wrote him out that way. There's an interesting storyline where The Undertaker engulfs pallbearer in cement live on, not live, but like on one of the wrestling shows there. The Undertaker is, like I said, he's probably one of the 4 guys on my wrestling Mount Rushmore, I would say. At WrestleMania, the biggest show, as I mentioned earlier, he has a 25-2 streak. He was 21, I believe 21-0, the longest winning streak of WrestleMania of any wrestler. I don't think that will ever be touched again. He's wrestled for 30 years in the WWE as that character while still being on top of the entire wrestling world. He's won Royal Rumbles. He's won multiple championships. That's a pretty much little sort of dip your toe in the water of the Undertaker lore. You know what? For this little break, I'm going to play some... just a little clip of The Undertaker here. And when I come back, I'll dive into the Phenom.
Merry Christmas, Yokozuna. Ho, ho, ho.
Alrighty, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed that little clip I put in there, whatever I put in there. I don't know until I edit this. However, let's get into the Phenom case file from the Steele Dossiers, the second short that was released for this series. It starts off with the intro, which I already mentioned. This title card has, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, it is a screen grab from Undertaker's WrestleMania 29 entrance, which I just made into a silhouette, put there, put font with it, boom, done, liked it. Now it cuts into me sitting at the desk, and as you can see, I added another thing on the desk, which is a crystal, which is in between the phone and all the folders and my hat there. There's just that little timbit. But as I'm going, as this short goes on, I go into my little black book. If you notice in the black book, as I said, my sister draws everything in this black book, but most of the writing in there is me doing the writing, so that is my actual handwriting. But if you notice on the close-up of the inside of the book, when I'm looking at the page with The Undertaker, there's a coffin. It says Dead Man Inc., which is a reference to The Undertaker himself. There's a little urn, and beside it, it says, an internal flame of light that cannot be extinguished, the origin of which cannot be explained, and then so forth. That is actually a line from one of the Undertaker's promos that he did at the 1994 Royal Rumble. So he just had a match with Yokozuna, which in real life is one of his best friends, and it's been a feud. Him and the Undertaker, Yokozuna and the Undertaker has been quite a feud, and at the end, they were having a coffin match, which the only way to win this match is you throw your opponent into the coffin, slam the lid shut, and then you win. But because the Undertaker has these powers, the urn kept bringing him out of, like, every time Yokozuna tried to throw him into the coffin, the urn kept bringing him out. So eventually what happened was all the heels, which is a wrestling term for bad guys, came out, beat up on the Undertaker. This match has no disqualification, so that was fine to do. Yokozuna grabs the urn, smashes it on the Undertaker's head. The urn starts blowing this green smoke because, it's all supernatural and mystical with the Undertaker. And Yokozuna and all the bad guys throw the Undertaker into the coffin, close it, and then make sure he can't get out of it. But what happens is on the Titantron on the screen, you see inside the coffin the Undertaker resting there, and when the bell tolls, he turns towards and looks into Cameron's, like he's talking to the whole audience from inside this coffin. And this is a bit of the promo that he cuts on them before you see the whole screen sort of shift up. And as it's shifting up, Undertaker appears from behind the screen and comes up, and it's almost like he's going to heaven. And that's how the pay-per-view ends, the 1994 Royal Rumble pay-per-view. It's a great little scene. If you want to watch it, I highly suggest it. Also, on the left-hand side of this book, my hand is covering another drawing, simply because that drawing is of me, but not me, not as Arthur Steele. It is a drawing of the doppelganger, which you won't see until the fourth short that comes out. So in order to film this, I had to just, cover it with my hand, so you don't see that it's actually me, and it doesn't give away anything just yet. So that's why my hand's covering that, if you ever wanted to know what was under there. So it goes on where I have to investigate this legend. This I keep calling it a legend because Undertaker is a legend. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer. And I make the decision of going to visit his yard, because he called the wrestling ring his yard, and he's the top dog. But for this, I used a cemetery, and the cemetery I used was Mount Pleasant Cemetery. Looking back on it now, I should have listened to my sister, and we should have did more shots of me walking around. However, because if you do notice my hair, I have very long hair. This shot took forever to do because my hair was out of place, and it looked horrible because all the barbershops were closed at the time. And I remember this was the day before I was going to get a haircut. So it was just like, okay, I need to finish this short because I already filmed the desk scenes before going to the cemetery, like a week in advance, but couldn't get to the cemetery until that day. And I was like, we either have to do it now or I just have to reshoot the whole everything else, and I didn't want to do that. So I do say, because I didn't see anything at the cemetery, this legend is getting old, because that's almost like an insult to, like, when the younger wrestlers are challenging the older wrestlers, they're like, oh, you're just old, without saying you're old. So I did that little nod of like, oh, this legend was just getting old. And when I say that, the dong rings, like what would happen whenever his entrance would begin, and everything goes dark. And when it comes back on, it's this purple haze, because Undertaker, to me, the Undertaker always has a purple haze. And I think you can see that throughout some of his entrances that he does. And at one time, his gear was purple, because an interesting little fact, when the Undertaker got injured one time, nobody knew where he went. And Ted DiBiase said he has the Undertaker. And the Undertaker comes out, and it's in this gray outfit. And but Paul Bearer comes out and he goes, no, that's an imposter Undertaker. I have the real Undertaker. And the real Undertaker eventually comes out for a match, and he's in, like, he has purple gloves and a purple tie, and he's fighting the imposter Undertaker in a gray tie and gray gloves. But moving on, when the lights come back on, like normal lights, well, it's black and white still. So when it comes back to black and white, there's a little coffin sitting on the desk. And I knew in order to do this short, I needed to do the whole music with the bell toll, a cemetery, and at least a little coffin. And luckily, my sister has, for a jewelry box, which she made, is a coffin, which she just painted black. So we emptied out the jewelry box, and I just placed it on the desk there for that brief moment. And that's how this short ends. This is a super short for this series. I think this is the shortest one I ever did. And it's only me on screen. And like I said, this is the last short before I went to go get a haircut. So moving forward, you see my hair gets it's short. But the only reason I wanted to do it on The Undertaker is because, so last year he retired, and when I was writing these, it was around May, April, May, I'll say more so May, and the WWE Network had a series on The Undertaker, which was called, I'm trying to remember it, it was called, it was called Undertaker: The Last Ride, and there was 5 parts to it. It took you from the beginning It took you to the middle of his career and to the end and to eventually, and I didn't mention this earlier, but it's a big thing for the Undertaker to be out of character, because this is one of the big things WWE has done where the Undertaker was out of character and he was Mark Calloway. Because as a wrestler, and this is why I've also done this, so as a wrestler, as the Undertaker, he came from the old school mentality where you have to protect your character. So that means you have to live your character. So that means beforehand, he didn't do many signings or anything like that. Or he didn't once his contract ended, well, his contract never ended. But he didn't do any other sort of interviews where he was out of character. He was always the stoic, dead man Undertaker character. And in this series, he talks about how he brought that character to life. And it's almost similar to acting when you're working on a character. He went the slow sort of pace, where at the time, like, wrestlers would have to fight in this fast pace, but he slowed everything down. The walk, the talk, like he really focused on being this character. And because The Undertaker was always my favorite wrestler ever since I was a kid, even if he was bad guy, good guy, he was always my favorite wrestler. And looking at it as an actor and seeing what he's done with the character and his character work, it just makes me appreciate him more. And because he was retiring last year at the Survivor Series, at the 2020 Survivor Series, I thought it would be great to do a tribute video, a video that kind of honors him the best way I can and with the resources I can. And I think this little short summed it up nicely for Arthur Steele. Yeah, that's why I did the Phenom short story with Arthur Steele. I do know he's not an actual, there's Bigfoot, there's mermaids, there's doppelgangers, there's all those kind of magical elements. And this is this is a wrestling character. And you know what? Moving forward, because now there's more characters out there. There's Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, who was out there. There's another wrestler by the name of Abaddon. There's another one called Van Heusen. I'm probably mispronouncing, but you know what? If they ever wanted to be part of Arthur Steele, all these new ones, I'd be like, sure, why not? But The Undertaker, I don't know if I'll do another wrestling one. It'll be, just thinking about it now, it'd be cool if Abaddon was just like, yeah, I want to be part of a Steele Dossier. But when I get there, I'll cross that road. But that's it. This is just my tribute and just to honor The Undertaker for all his years of wrestling service and entertainment he provided me. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast here. I hope you enjoyed the Phenom short that you saw. I should pull a quote from The Undertaker. Just to, because last time I did a quote from Bigfoot. So let's do a quote from The Undertaker. I'm just quickly finding one now. I'm just like I said, I'm just, here's a good quote to end off on. So as The Undertaker would say, sometimes it's hell getting to heaven. And with that, wherever you're watching or listening to this, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, clap, you know what, clap. I probably won't see it physically, but my soul will feel it. And so with that, thank you for listening. Have a good one.